Sarah Donovan joins us to look back at the weekend's hurling. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm absolutely heartbroken. I am. I'm absolutely heartbroken. We actually stopped in Ballylanders last night on the way home. Limerick country now to kind of drown our sorrows and watch the Sunday game, and we were treated to a rousing rendition of Horse Outside, which cheered us up a small bit. So kudos to the Limerick lads for giving us that.
Well, very good. I haven't seen them do that on the terraces yet. Maybe
they should.
I was going to say.
It was, look, I suppose last week we talked about the Munster final and this being a Munster final for Cork, and they gave it absolutely everything, their best performance of the year, scored 130, and it still wasn't enough.
Yeah. I don't know. Look, we'll have one sentence about this, but is the system fair that they're out now and that like we have Joe McDonagh teams and the Dubs in and Cork are gone?
I think when they look back, they won one game. You know, they had 4 chances. Yesterday, they did very little wrong, but crucially, it was their retention of the puck outs, their sideline cuts, the retention of the frees. That's a work on for Cork for 2024. I think we can say that we're disappointed. We are, but the system is there, and three teams got out of the system and Cork didn't, you know. We can't, I suppose, keep pushing the blame somewhere else. We had 3 chances. We didn't take them. Okay,
let's talk about Limerick before we get into Cork, because they're now in a Munster final, which, you know, I think we all predicted at the start of the championship Limerick would be in the Munster final. We just didn't think they'd be squeaking through by the skin of their teeth. But there's the weather was good. It was all sunny. It's definitely summertime, and all of a sudden Limerick looked like they're close to being Limerick again.
Yeah, there was flashes of that in the game. I think Cork put a lot into the game and Limerick matched it. Like, they've matched tip, you know, like every game this season they've pressure applied and they've found a way. Interestingly, obviously Cian Lynch didn't come on till late, so Cathal O'Neill was given that big spot centre forward to work with, and, you know, got a great goal in the first half. My sense though with Limerick is that they're actually not as strong from the bench as they have been in previous years, so there is potential, there's hope for other teams. They can be caught.
It feels open, I think, at the moment, as opposed to at the start of the year, where it felt like how close will anybody get to Limerick is kind of what we're looking for, which that's not the case. Like, Limerick could be beaten by any of the teams who've come out of Munster on a day in Croke Park, and they could also be beaten, you think, by Galway performed the way they did in the second half against the Dubs, and like Kilkenny, I think we just have to write off the performance against Wexford.
Well, look, they scored 5 goals against Wexford. The games yesterday were bananas, but interestingly, after the game, Henry Shefflin said, after the Dubs game, he said, look, we had no contests in Westmeath and Antrim. We came flat into this game. I'm misquoting him, but that's the essence of what he said. And I'd said to you guys last week, if Limerick were to come through as third place winners, they'd have met a Kilkenny or a Galway when they were only tepid, and it would have been a great time to meet them. So the warning signs are there for all teams. You know, unless you're going at full tilt, you can be caught.
Is discipline an issue? I think we've discussed discipline with Limerick already this season, Sarah, but I think half the outfield defence had been yellow carded by James Owens in the first half, and a couple of Patrick Horgan frees that just came from, again, indiscipline and giving away stupid frees. So is that a potential problem going forward for them, do you think?
To clean it up. I think that's the Kyle Hayes, I suppose, free on Dara Fitz in the first half. There was more to that. You know, he potentially could have got a red card for that because of, I suppose, how aggressive he was going into it, and he did strike the player. So he was probably lucky to just get a yellow. Outside of that, there was a bit of fooling on the square with Aaron Gillane and Sean O'Donoghue, and to me it looks like, you know, Aaron Gillane was holding Sean as much as Sean was trying to defend the square, and they get a penalty out of it. Diarmuid Burns buries it, and all of a sudden Limerick are in the ascendancy. I think for Aaron Gillane, unfortunately, referees will be wise to it now for the next 2 or 3 games, and he probably won't get the same softness or soundness from referees, because they'll have seen what he's at, which is holding the hurley.
That battle between Gillane and O'Donoghue was pretty impressive to watch.
Oh, it was class, but you know what? Gillane, we said at the start of the season, Limerick weren't ticking without him, and I firmly believe if if Kylie hadn't brought him back in after Christmas, Limerick wouldn't be remotely near where they are now. He is ticking every box for Limerick, and some of the scores he got yesterday, he just tips out for the ball. It's effortless.
It was a really brilliant contest, and in fairness, there were chances at both ends, and I understand how people will be upset with the penalty. It feels like it's a massive swing. Before Limerick get their first goal, Gillane actually hits the post with a kicked shot, which, channeling his inner Nicky English from like the late 80s, early 90s. And that
was all the soccer training there before Christmas.
Exactly,
George, I remember.
That's what he was doing, yeah. But Cork's inability to retain possession coming out of it actually gives Limerick the first goal after they had that kind of that was a big chance for Limerick, and it hits the post, and that's great. But then a minute later, it balls in the back of the net, and you're like, that could be. But they come back from it. That's the thing. Like, so flaky Cork are not flaky anymore.
No, but look, I suppose for me, and look, I had a great seat. I was in the open stand. I caught a lot of sun yesterday, and it's uncomfortable watching Cork play out from the back. They need to move the ball more quickly, and they got caught in possession yesterday, and they'll hate that. Like, it's there for all to see. He needed to move the ball away quicker, earlier, and William O'Donoghue turns him over. So from that, and then from the puck outs as well, I know Nash has spoken to you previously on the Friday about the chain. It's not just about the keeper, it's about the other players who are moving into line and moving into space. That broke down a lot for Cork yesterday. Cork will look back and say, God, there was crucial moments where we made tiny mistakes and they were punished so badly, whereas Limerick seemed to be able to recover more quickly.
It was the performance from Cork as well. I think you described it as the best in the championship so far, ironically, that they saved the best to last, and yet it just wasn't enough. But from a Cork perspective, albeit there'll be a bit of a post-mortem here, Sarah, but there's so many positives for them.
Yesterday, like that first 20 minutes for Cork, 11 shots, 11 scores, breathtaking stuff, and I suppose for the first time in a long time, they were actually matching Limerick physically. So Limerick were coming out from the back and Cork were taking them on. There was a great turnover with Dara Fitz or Rob Downey, and he gives the ball out to Tim O'Mahony, and Tim O'Mahony gets a sweet score. There's another one, Rob Downey shifts out to the sideline, gives a class pass to Luke Mead, and Luke Mead's there all on his own in space, gets a great score. So many stunning scores from Cork yesterday, and so accurate, and to score 130, and then you've got the under-20s coming up behind them. That under-20s team has some real quality in it, and I suppose for Pat Ryan now next year, it's about bringing up a couple of players. Like you've seen Adam Hogan into the Clare setup out of leaving cert and making a massive impact. I think Cork probably have to do that with a couple of younger players. And yesterday for me as well, if you looked at the Cork bench, it was all forwards. There was, I think, 3 defensive options. So Cork need to find backs because their defensive unit works so hard. If one of the lads yesterday had to go off injured, Cork were in trouble.
Okay, so Cork are gone. It's heartbreaking. Tipperary, after, I mean, again, one of the most outlandish performances that we've seen. They all they had to do was not lose by 5, and they couldn't even manage that. In the end, when they're mounting a comeback, it's they just know that, but they couldn't even do that. So I don't know how they respond. They'd made changes. Obviously, there were players injured who might be back by the time that the big games come back for them, but
so they're heading to Offaly. That's their next game. They're heading to Tullamore. I was talking to a tip man last night, and he was unsure whether he was going to go to Offaly to see the match. He was so disgusted after the final whistle yesterday. But crucially for them, look, Jason Ford, Jake Morris, Cathal Barrett, 3 fulcrum players that come back into that Tip setup. And I suppose when we were watching the match back on the Sunday game last night, Desi Hutchinson's goal is fortuitous, and Tip had been pushing to that point, and Hutchinson punishes kind of, I suppose, a bit of confusion with Rhys Shelley, and Tip again get murdered for the smallest mistakes. Do I think Tip are going to improve from here? Absolutely. I think it's probably the wake-up call that they needed.
So you don't take anything from any conclusions drawn from how Waterford set up against them for other teams set up against Tip. It's just, this is an aberration. It's a thing of itself, and they'll be different after they get over the Offaly game, which we assume they will. They'll be grand.
Look, last week they hurled a world ball against Limerick, and they had to come out 7 days later and find something, against Waterford. And like it or not, there was lots of history between Waterford and Liam Cahill, and there's obviously going to be a massive, I suppose, drive there to show him that he walked away from that team and what he walked away from. And the best way that you can show that to an old manager is to beat him. And soundly beat him. And Cahill was very straightforward about that, and you were chatting beforehand about him speaking about the emotional baggage. Davy Fitz had basically said they're emotionally damaged from last season, and that obviously hurt Cahill, right? And that's he's speaking about that, but there's no question that Waterford team yesterday went out to show Cahill what he's given up, because I think they're surprised that he walked away. So does it give Davy another year, do you think? Unfortunately, yes. Right, so you're not a Davy fan, but from a Waterford perspective, like that performance, if they performed like that, and like to Davy's point, like they should have beaten Limerick in the first game, and if they'd done that, they'd be going through. Do you know, like we spoke in the league about how crazy the systems he was doing were trying to play. He was launching 40 players into the forward line on a puck out. He has the players, he has the quality, and he couldn't go route one, but he just doesn't seem to want to go route one. That's the frustration there. To his credit on Billy Nolan, particularly, going to the sweeper centre back role, that's an ingenious enough move in hindsight, but does that maybe come from the back room? Is that where I'm leaning towards this? Yeah, look, I suppose the press box is a great place to get info, and a lot of lads in the press box yesterday knew that Peter Guiley, who's in the backroom team with Davy, is actually from Rowan Moore, and Billy Nolan played centre back for Rowan Moore in 2021 in the county final, and he's actually played centre back for Waterford as well in the fifth. So not the most shocking of places, to find him. And I suppose, we've said previously, Owen Murphy's played outfield for Kilkenny, Nicky Quaid's played outfield for Limerick in times past. Look, it's no more when we see the footballers outfield as well. I think it was a great move from Waterford yesterday. It was completely unexpected, and we were saying that Tyke de Burke's role was very hard to fill, and I suppose Kilm Lyons and Jack Fagan are different kinds of players, and it doesn't suit them to play that role. So to be able to bring Billy Nolan in was a masterstroke, whose ever idea it was. We should talk briefly about Wexford and the situation there. Like I did feel a lot of sympathy. We see what Wexford are capable of when players are fit and they have the majority of their best players available for them, but they just don't have the strength and depth. So I don't know, maybe I'm being too soft on them, and actually they should be getting savaged for what's gone on this year when they do have many players in the prime of their career, and so whatever you need to do to make sure that they're going to be fit for championship, that's the job of the management team. So I don't know where you fall down on this, but there was a lot on the line for Wexford yesterday, and they didn't back down from it. To be able to go to Kilkenny and get a result like that, especially with the start that Kilkenny got. Kilkenny were 8 points up. Owen Cody was having a field day, and then to be able to turn it around and come back up 7 points up in the second half, like magnificent stuff from Wexford. And actually Lee Chin had a grade 2 AC tear in the last 2 weeks, so he isn't even fully fit, and he puts in that performance. But I suppose crucially, Darragh Egan mentions the Wexford support. Despite last week and despite how horrendous it was, Wexford filled the stadium, massive support for the team, and the players stood up. But there's so much quality in that Wexford team. You say, lads, you can't go to Dublin and shoot 19 wides. You can't lose a 17-point lead against Westmeath. Psychologically, you have to be able to play for 70 minutes to give yourselves a chance, and they weren't. So they deserve to take, I suppose, it on the chin now and say, what are we going to do? But look, that Wexford under 20 team that's coming up behind that group has been in 2 Leinster finals. There is quality there, and it was crucial that they didn't go into Joe McDonagh, because you have to blend these two teams and they have to stay at the top tier. I do think that the fans arriving late to Wexford Park was actually a great thing for them to put the game back 10 minutes. So they've got to take. They were, when it turns out when they're unified, they can do great things. We'll leave it there for now. Good stuff, Sarah. Thanks a million. Thanks, lads. Sorry for your trouble. Yeah. Well, the performance rankings and putting us in the red. Yeah. Did you need to do that? Look, I mean, not my call. Let me just wash my hands of that. Yeah. Sorry. Hang on a second. This is Don Logan is
Davey's Goblet of Minor Prestige or whatever, like they're now also rans, like that, also running this year. I don't think it's fair. I actually think that there should be.
I'm quite shocked. You score 130. Like these performance rankings are cat. Yeah, sorry lads, I'm giving it up this morning, and the summer's over, by the way. The kids shouldn't even finish school. They should go right through to September.
Not even June.
Feedback's always welcome. Feedback's always welcome, Sarah, on the performance rankings. We appreciate that.
Well, you've disappointed me so much this morning. I'm going back to Ballylanders. I'd say they're still there singing.
I'd say they are.
Good luck.
Thanks a million. Sarah Donovan giving us her thoughts there. Anthony